I don't know.
You want to come out?
Okay, well, come over. We get you. Start, say everybody from my end.
Congratulations, you are.
All right, let's go.
Don't insult me. Little Keeler.
15.
This is a précis. A précis bears the same relation to a whole paper as a bouillon cube does to a whole roast of beef, if I may use that analogy. I'm not taking food thing. Okay, in other words, you got to boil it down and down and down and down. Now, these are the directions right here. These are directions for a précis. This is what it must contain. This is the original paragraph, and there are two examples of précis. I want you to look this thing over. I want you to know just exactly what you're doing and how to handle this thing. Because some of you are going to have to do it for next year. Late this week or early next week, I'm going to go into this thing. Again, précis. There's one there for Wissel. 2, 3, pass those over. Okay, now.
Make sure Patty gets.
Don't bother looking at them now, just put them away. I'm going to get into Pygmalion.
I didn't understand it, man.
I'll show you the use today for you. Now this is the idea. First of all, by this time you should be familiar with the Pygmalion legend. Those of you who studied mythology will recall. Way back when, a Greek sculptor by the name of Pygmalion carved a statue. A beautiful woman. The statue was named Galatea. The statue was so beautiful he fell in love with it. He asked the goddess of love, Aphrodite, to give him a woman just like that. So Aphrodite goes, brings the statue to life. That is the genesis of the Pygmalion legend. Now what you have here in this play is a speech teacher by the name of Henry Higgins. All right? He starts with some pretty crude material. A flower girl by the name of Eliza Doolittle, Eliza as she's usually known. And he turns her into a lady. That's basically it. Now, a couple of things to mention. First of all, some of you might be familiar with a television thing that was done a year or two ago called Upstairs, Downstairs. All right. Now remember that this play was first done in 1912, at the same time that Upstairs, Downstairs was set, okay? In those days, it was entirely possible for two social classes to live in the same house and in some instances not understand each other. Now you might think that's strange, but consider this, for example. That list of British English that I gave you. Before I handed you this list, how many of you are familiar with the expression turnips? British English. How many of you knew it before you saw the list? Turnips. What are they? Trouser cuffs. We don't wear them on uniforms. Okay. How about the expression plimsolls? Plimsolls. Have you ever heard it before? Okay, to us, sneakers. Okay? The expression elastoplast. Elastoplast. Band-Aid, but how many of you knew that before? Squib. Firecracker. How about where weight is concerned? Stone. Equivalent, 14 pounds. Reel of cotton. We call it a spool of thread. And finally, how's about drawing pin? What do we call it? Well, I got one of them holding the bottom of that recommended reading list for college-bound students right there. What do we call it? Thumbtack. Drawing pin. Logical, holds drawings down to a board, architectural drawings, something like that. Okay. Anyway, these people could sometimes not understand each other's turns of phrase. I told you, for example, that one of the ways that you can check out, see was somebody reared above the Mason-Dixon line or below the Mason-Dixon line, ask him to pronounce this word, I-N-S-U-R-E-N-C-E.
Sure.
If he were reared above the Mason-Dixon line, he will probably pronounce that word insurance. If you were reared down below the Mason-Dixon line, insurance. That's the way it is. Okay. Now, here, you're probably aware from reading this thing, at least some of you, that this play Pygmalion is the genesis for the movie play, musical play, My Fair Lady, okay? The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain. Okay, that's one of the songs. Not in Cockney accent it doesn't. This is what Eliza talks. The Rhine in Spain stays mainly in the plain. Now what is her aspiration? What does she want to do? What's her thing? What does she really want to do?
Pronounce it right.
She wants to sell flowers where? She doesn't want to sell on the street corner. She has to do this for a living. But where does she really want to work? She wants to work in a flower shop. But why can't she?
She can't.
They won't hire her because they can't understand her. She's got an accent like this. Okay. In London, you know, for example, from around Charleston. Charleston has an accent that's peculiar to Charleston. Well, it's the same thing. In London, one portion here, you have what we call a Cockney accent. There's an old saying. There's a church there, St. Mary le Bow. If an individual is reared within sound of Bow bells, the sound of those church bells, then he is considered a Cockney. Okay. In Hampshire, hurricanes hardly ever happen. Not in Cockney. In Hampshire, hurricanes hardly ever happen. That's the way it's pronounced. Okay. Even now, to this day, in England, language still, at least to some degree, determines social class. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, not, but for some reason, a Scottish accent has never been a particular drawback in England. But a Yorkshire accent, Sir instead of sir, so on, it'll kill you every time you try for a job in one of the big banks, one of the big insurance companies, what have you. Okay, now, you're introduced to all the main characters right off the bat. George Bernard Shaw, please, not Bernard, Bernard. George Bernard Shaw wrote Shavian drama, Shavian. Anytime you see that adjective, it refers to the place of George Bernard Shaw. All right. He didn't like Americans very well, but he did write some darn good plays. Okay.
Shavian.
Shavian, capital S-H-A-V-I-N. It's easier to say Shavian than to say Shawian. Yeah.
Hey, does that Cockney accent, does that refer to lower class in London?
It is considered lower class, yeah.
Is that be like a Boston accent down the
No, accents in this country have never made a whole lot of difference to most people. We think, for example, most people consider a southern accent charming because it falls easily on the ears. Some people consider a Bostonian accent a little bit harsh. You know, refer to the bard. Shakespeare. All right, when you hear Shavian, you automatically think George Bernard Shaw. Please pronounce it Bernard. Okay, so you've got the Ainsford Hills. You then have Liza, or if you prefer Eliza Doolittle, Flower Girl. Her daddy, who is well named Doolittle because he does just as little as possible to get along. He's a natural. He is a natural in literature. He's one of my favorite characters, but he's a natural. Okay. You have Henry Higgins, who is a phonetician. Now, Higgins makes his money largely by erasing people's backgrounds. That is, you have some guy who's just made a mint in canning pickles or something like that, and he wants to forget, and he wants other people not to know where he came from, and so he goes to someone like Higgins for voice lessons. Ava Gardner, for example, came out of North Carolina about 25, 30 years ago. She had a North Carolina accent, yay thick. In Hollywood, they prefer that people speak what we call general American, that is, without a trace of regional accent, unless they deliberately put it on for purposes of local color or what have you. So they sent her to one of their best speech teachers who erased her accent, and she came out speaking, as we say, a general American accent. All right, this is what Higgins does, except that he teaches people how to pronounce things like the broad A, rather, so on. Where do we get that in this country? Upper East Coast, there's some people who speak of potato and tomato. Julie Child does it all the time. I like her pronunciation. Tomato. She's always dicing tomatoes in her recipes. Okay. You also have Colonel Pickering, who serves largely as a foil for Henry Higgins. What do I mean when I say he's a foil? F-O-I-L, foil. He's sort of like the backdrop or the sounding board. When when Hollywood did this thing as a movie some years ago, Rex Harrison played the lead. He played Henry Higgins. And for Pickering, whom did they choose? They chose a guy who was about 20 years older than Harrison, just to make Harrison look better on the stage, on the screen, rather. Okay. And then finally we have Mrs. Pierce. Mrs. Pierce is a good illustration of the common sense English servant. The lady who has her feet planted firmly on the ground, who knows what's going on, and above all is not afraid to speak up to her employer. Where did you see her before? Something you just read recently.
Oh.
And David Copperfield?
Yeah.
Who?
Peggy.
Peggy, Clara Peggy, okay. Yeah.
You said Colonel Pickers is an assistant?
He's a foil. No, he's a speech teacher in his own right, but in this play he acts as a foil for Higgins. A foil is someone who acts as a sort of backdrop or sounding board in, what do they call him in vaudeville? He's the fellow who winds up sometimes as the butt of the joke, so what do they call him? They use the term straight man. Straight man. Okay, now, the play opens in a rainstorm. People have just left the theater. They're clustered under the portico. This is a fancy schmancy overhanging porch roof, if you will, trying to keep out of the rain. You get right away, you get the impression that Freddie Hensford Hill does not have as much push as he should have. Why? Because his mother and his sister pick on him all the time. He's sopping wet, and they send him back out into the rain to find him a cab. They won't let him stay there. Get out there and get us a cab. So he runs out, and in the process, he bumps into Eliza. She sells these penny bunches of violets, or she calls them violets, from on the street. This is okay so long as she puts it, she keeps off the curb. Freddie smacks into her, knocks the basket down, messes up a couple bunches of violets. And she says something about, "Now then, Freddie, look where you gone there." I said, "Huh?" And Mrs. Ainsford Hill picks this up immediately. "How do you know my son is called Freddie, pray?" In British English, what does the term pray mean aside from, pray? It's another term for what? Please. Please. Okay. So how do you know that my son's name is Freddie, pray? And the flower girl comes back, and she lets her have a blasted cockney you would not believe. Look at it in your book here. She said, "Ow! He's your son. If you'd done your duty by him, the mother should have known better than to spoil a poor gal's flowers and then run away without paying. You pay me for them?" And Mrs. Ainsford, this just about melts the gold out of her teeth. She can't believe this. "Ow!" Right there on page 699, left-hand column. "Ow! He's your son. As if you'd done your duty by him, the mother should have known better than to spoil a poor gal's flowers and then run away without paying. You paying me for them?" Every blessed word you're saying. And all of a sudden, Eliza starts climbing the walls. Now, why? She says, "I ain't done nothing wrong speaking to the gentleman. I have a right to sell flowers if I keep off the curb. I'm a respectable girl, so help me," and so on, so on, so on. You know, this is the one thing she keeps coming back to all through this thing. I'm a good girl, I am. Even in the fifth act, after she's turned into a lady and so on, so on, she says, "I sold flowers. I didn't sell myself." This is the one thing she's got to hang on to. She's dirty. You can plant potatoes under her fingernails. She's got lice in her hair. I mean, she's really dirty. But she keeps herself as clean as she can, but there's simply not that much opportunity. But she keeps coming back to this. I'm a good girl, I am. All right, now, why does she start going bananas right here? Why?
She thinks he's a bicycle.
All right, she thinks that this fella, as they put it, is a copper's narc, and the term narc meant then exactly what it means now, an informer. Okay, I suspect that we got that from the British. Either that, or it's a takeoff on the expression narcotics. Anyway, she starts going crazy here, and the fella calms her down. She's afraid that she will be arrested for purposes of soliciting for prostitution. This is what she's afraid of right here. A streetwalker, as we say. And she's not. She's a perfectly respectable girl who is trying to get by in life as best she can. All right, now, Henry Higgins is standing there and he's taking notes. He uses what we call the IPA. That's the International Phonetic Alphabet. Now, if you're trained in that thing, you might not understand what somebody says. That is the language you use it. But if you're trained in the IPA, you can jot down what he's saying in IPA symbols, and you can show this to somebody who does know Hungarian or Swahili or what have you, and he will be able to read and translate for you. For example, this.
International Phonetic Alphabet.
Always enclose it this way in brackets. That is a rough equivalent of Jerry in the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. That's right, that's what it looks like. This, for example, that's the way you say shh in the IPA. This is what we call the schwa. That's the unstressed that's the commonest sound of all. The schwa. Okay, now.
Is it like shorthand? There's a stern rod on that. Yeah. Yeah. Turn down, then goes out like that. Hey, just what you want to do?
So you gotta need that. Keep those?
For the second 250? Good. We got quite a few trucks out there in the field now.
Hey, bring the wood.
Hold on. Okay. Hey, Paul. You got graduated silver on the door. Turn like it's just been back again. Yes. No. Hey, you need to graduate silver. Steve took my lighter. I need to Man, just concentrate on these numbers for me. Get up here. Man, you got any blue lips?
Come here, stop over there. You still stop for that?
This is right.
We will concentrate on H2S.